A. U gaat luisteren naar een gesprek met mevrouw Wilson. Zij is werkzaam in het televisiebedrijf. Niet voor de BBC, maar voor een van de maatschappijen die tezamen ITV vormen, Independent Television. Ze legt nu in het voorbeeld uit wat haar baan precies inhoudt. Hierbij is geen opgave.
I'm head of program resources for London Weekend Television, which is one of the 15 companies that make up the ITV network in Great Britain. And I'm largely responsible for allocating our various technical resources to programs. We have 5 studios and a certain number of film crews and video crews. And my job is to find out what the programs need in the way of resources and then make sure that we can supply the facilities from what we have available to us.
Example.
De toets begint nu.
Would you say that your role in TV productions is mostly of a technical nature?
It's not an enormously technical role. It is mostly a planning role. So I don't need to know, for instance, how a camera works, but I need to know that a particular entertainment special, for instance, needs 5 cameras in order to be recorded properly. Some of our programs might be made entirely in studio, for instance. Others might be made on a combination of film and video, and it's a question of getting familiar with the various programs to find out what sort of program it is and what sort of things it will need.
1.
Are you involved in a production right from the start? Do script writers come to you for advice, for example?
We have departments in our company that deal with drama, current affairs and features, light entertainment and arts. And I will usually deal with one representative from each of those departments who will relay all the needs of that department to me. So I don't usually deal direct with somebody who is writing the script. They will pass that information on to their departmental manager. On some of the more complicated programs, for instance on some of the big dramas, it may be necessary for me to talk to the person who is writing the script, but it's quite rare.
2.
How would you define the relationship between people in your kind of job and program makers?
They don't, it's not generally thought very good that people who are in organisational roles should contribute to the creative process. There are different skills, and I wouldn't presume to make a contribution in that sense. But it is very nice to actually have communication with the people who are making the programmes, because if you're doing a forward planning job, you quite often find yourself in an office with lots of sheets of paper and a computer, and you lose touch with what is actually being made.
3.
Before your present job, you used to work in one of the program departments, didn't you?
Yes, I used to work in current affairs, and that was very exciting because however well you planned, you always in the end had to respond to what was in the news, and therefore you were always adjusting and always trying to react to things that were happening. And I miss that sense of excitement, although I love what I'm doing now and find it very interesting. there is a certain buzz that you get from being in the middle of program making that you don't get once you're more in a planning position.
4.
Having good contacts all over the world will be very important in this kind of work. Is it difficult to find them?
Some places that we went to regularly, we already had contacts. For instance, if we went to Washington or Paris, it was not difficult. But while I was there, one of the things that happened was the Falklands War. And I spent a lot of time trying to find people. For instance, to get film back, because of course there were no flights back to England, and I rang up out of pure speculation the main television station in Montevideo, and luckily found somebody who could speak English, and was excited, I think, to be a part of it. And of course we paid him as well.
5.
Two names which you regularly come across are ITV and IBA, the Independent Broadcasting Authority. Could you explain what they are?
ITV is made up of 15 regional companies. Each company is awarded a franchise, which is a contract awarded by the Independent Broadcasting Authority, based on a series of undertakings about the variety of programs it's going to transmit. For instance, we have to be sure that we transmit a certain number of hours of adult education every year, and we have to make a commitment about making serious current affairs programs and arts programs, and that has all been up till now fairly carefully controlled. But within that framework we have independence over the editorial makeup of each of our programs.
6.
I understand that you are quite satisfied with the present system.
In fact, the system is about to change, and in future, after 1992, the question of the quality of programs will be of lesser importance than it is now, and the franchises will be awarded to the highest bidder. The argument is that what appears on our television screens should be the result of market forces, that we shouldn't dictate to people what sort of programming they ought to have. They should be able to choose. But I believe that we will see lower standards as a result of this, which I think is a pity.
7.
Do you do any market research before launching a new series, for example?
We do quite a lot of market research, but market research is not always foolproof. In my company, we have a director of programs who works a lot of the time by instinct, and although he will look at the market research very seriously, often in the end he will make his own decision, and his instincts are usually right. One of the problems that we have found with market research is that if you ask people what they would like to see, they often say serious programmes, documentaries, news programmes, but in fact, when it comes to turning their television set on, they don't seem to want to watch them after all.
8.
I understand that you are not altogether happy with serials imported from the USA. Is that because they do not reflect the British way of life?
Well, I'm not sure that they should necessarily reflect the British way of life. I think it is a perfectly reasonable thing for the British to learn how other countries live and what their way of life is. I think the number of American series is so prevalent everywhere, I think, now, that certain ways become too prevalent everywhere. I quite like countries to be slightly different. For instance, different nationalities have such different senses of humour, and I think that is something that should be preserved. An American joke elicits an immediate laugh, whereas I think a British joke may not. It may be a slightly slanted look at the world.
9.
What do you think yourself of these drama series, these so-called soap operas?
I think it's a perfectly reasonable form of entertainment if it's done well. It's no different in some ways to some of the old magazine serials that came out. For instance, Dickens used to write soap operas in a way, serials that left you hanging on a cliff edge at the end of one instalment and you had to wait to buy your newspaper the next week to find out what happened. It's the same tradition, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think some of them are made too fast and on too low budgets, and they are therefore not that good.
10.
Do you have a favourite soap opera at all?
A favourite soap opera? Well, now I'm going to spoil everything I've said before. I used to really love Dallas when it was first on, for all the reasons, I suppose, that everyone likes that sort of soap opera, because you could just slump down and watch it and lose yourself in it. It was very cleverly written. Certainly when it first came out. I think more recently they've run out of ideas, but when it first came out I thought it was very cleverly written. They did write it in such a way that you desperately wanted to know what was going to happen next, and I think that's very clever.
11.
What about talk shows? They have always enjoyed great popularity in Britain, I think.
I think people now are much less patient with that sort of programme. If you look at archive footage of old television programmes, you will see quite a lot of programmes where people talked for very long periods of time. But nowadays, it seems that people's concentration levels are much shorter, and so those sort of talk shows tend to be interspersed with action footage much more than they used to in the past. I think people are used to seeing a succession of images now, and they are used to being able to turn over to another channel if they don't like what they're watching. Channel hopping, we call it here.
12,